Hey there, Lorcana lovers. My name's Lizard, and today I want to talk to you about the top 5 best decks in Lorcana. Before we begin, I want to clarify that the top decks often change as more tournaments are completed and as more sets are released. As of right now, we're heading into February of 2024, so it won't be long until Set 3, Into the Inklands, is released. With that being said, each of the decks in this video have performed extremely well in tournaments all across the world. However, there is one deck in particular that still seems to hold its position at the very top. The 2 largest tournaments to date have been held on Pixelborn, which is an online platform. Both of these tournaments hosted nearly 300 players, so I'm using the results of these tournaments as the most recent statistics for choosing the top 5 best decks. Let's get into it. Okay, Emerald Steel Discard. This deck worries me a little bit. I'm putting it at number 5, however I do think it's going to continuously get better and better. This deck is very frustrating to play against. It likes to just completely and totally wreck your game plan by discarding cards from your hand nearly every turn. And as you're discarding the cards from your hand, your opponent, as long as they have this Prince John in play, they're constantly gaining cards from this. So as you can see, Emerald Steel Discard plays a lot of low-cost characters to get down early on in the game to start aggressively gaining you lore, and many of these characters are also frustrating to deal with because they would have you discard a card or banish the challenging character. So as long as you're getting your Prince John down on turn 3 and continuously discarding cards from their hand, you are going to be in a great position to win the game and frustrate the heck out of your opponent while doing so. Quick side note, I'm pulling all of these decks from a website called dreamborn.inc. If you don't know about this website already, you should definitely check it out. You can view all of the best decks and most popular decks, and you can also see how much it would cost to build these decks. Now, a lot of you, I'm sure, have opened up some packs and already maybe have some of the cards you would need, so you're able to get on this website and from there price just what else you would need and how much that would cost to build the deck that you want to play. A very, very useful website. I definitely recommend checking it out. So I'll be sure to leave a link in the description below so you guys can check that out whenever you'd like. Alright, so at number 4 I'm putting the green Fossa deck. This is an Amber Emerald aggro deck that features the one and only Mufasa. So this deck actually did really well in the most recent Pixelborn tournament. It finished in the 2nd place spot, losing to Ruby Amethyst. However, this deck and the next 2 decks that I will be discussing kind of have a rock, paper, scissors style matchup. So really, spots 2, 3, and 4 could all somewhat interchange depending on the matchup. So what I mean by that is, this deck would probably lose more often than not to the Amber Steel deck. The Amber Steel deck would lose more often than not to the Sapphire Steel deck, and this green Fossa deck plays pretty well into that Sapphire Steel deck. Hence you have rock, paper, scissors. I personally have been having a lot of fun playing this Emerald Amber deck. Mufasa is just an awesome card. Once you get it into play, it sticks pretty well, and what I mean is, not only does it have a 3/3 stat line, it can quest for 2, and if it's removed from the board, you can look at the top card of your deck, and if it's a character card, you can play that card. That is extremely helpful when going up against decks that rely heavily on removal, like the Steel decks and of course the Ruby decks that always like to play Be Prepared. So this deck really does well for that reason. It has other characters that can gain lore very fast and are also pretty sticky, like Cusco. He was really awesome in set 1, and I'm happy that he's also found a spot here into the 2nd set. Now, Cusco has no touchy, which makes him frustrating to deal with, because when he's challenged and banished, you may also banish the challenging character, and he can quest for 3, and on top of that, he has Ward, so he cannot be chosen as a target for removal for certain action cards, song cards, and other abilities. He is safe from a lot of things. This deck also features a rather underrated card, Genie on the Job. This is a 6-cost uninkable card. However, it does quest for 2, it has evasive, which means it can only be challenged by other characters with evasive, and it has the ability Disappear. When you play this character, you may return chosen character to their player's hand. So you can return one of your own characters, or more often than not, you're going to want to return one of your opponent's characters back to their hand. So to play this deck properly, you need to have a really awesome opening hand. You need to have a curve that goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, meaning you're going to be able to get a character into play on every turn. And it's very, very helpful whenever you can have a Doc in your opening turn, because you can play him on turn 3, and then by turn 4, when you quest with him, he allows you to play a character for 1 less ink. So that means on turn 4, you can play 5-cost characters like Mufasa or Cusco, or some of these really high questing characters like Ray and Mad Hatter. And the longer Doc stays in play, the better off you are. So if you happen to already have a Simba bodyguard in play protecting your Doc, that would be great. And before you know it, you're going to be at 20 lore and your opponent is not going to realize what just happened. Amber Steel Songs. This deck has been in the top spots since the beginning of Lorcana back in set 1. It was arguably the best deck, and it continues to do really well, especially now with this new item introduced in Rise of the Floodborn called Sleepy's Flute. If you played a song this turn, you can exert this item and gain 1 lore. Now you can have up to 4 copies of this flute in your deck, so for every song you play, if you have 4 of these flutes out, you're going to gain 4 lore. And because this deck runs so many songs in it, you're going to be playing those flutes quite a lot. And on top of that, you have characters like Ariel and Gaston. These are both 3-drop characters that can sing 5-cost songs. So that's extremely helpful. And Ariel actually has an ability called Musical Debut. When you play this character, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you may reveal a song card and put it into your hand. Clearly, this is a very well-made deck. Everything about it just synergizes fantastically, and most plays you make are going to get you closer and closer to your win condition. And that is really awesome because you don't have to necessarily quest with your characters to make this happen. You can be having these characters sing songs like Grab Your Sword, which is damaging your opponent's characters, and as long as your flutes are out, you're going to gain lore at the same time. And lastly, being that the flute is actually an item card, it is completely safe if your opponent is to play any type of removal. Specifically, be prepared. Sapphire Steel is quickly becoming one of the most popular decks in Lorcana. This deck was piloted all the way to the 2nd place spot in one of the recent Pixelborn tournaments, and it was also in the top 8 of the most recent Pixelborn tournament. This deck isn't the easiest deck to pilot. You do want to do a lot of ramping in your early game, but by the time you get to mid to late game, you're forced to make a lot of challenging decisions. And quite honestly, it takes a highly skilled player to pilot this deck correctly. One of the scariest things about this deck is its ability to synergize Nothing to Hide with a Whole New World. These 2 cards play so well together. Nothing to Hide allows you to look at all the cards in your opponent's hand and then draw a card. Knowing what's in their hand grants you a lot of confidence when playing A Whole New World, which would have them and yourself discard your hand and draw 7 new cards. Ideally, you want to make them discard cards like Be Prepared. This deck's success does heavily rely on having Fishbone Quill in your opening hand. This is an incredible card for ramping because it allows you to put any card from your hand into your inkwell face down. That includes uninkable cards. This is very valuable because, like I said, this is a ramp deck, and if you're unable to get at least 1 ink into your inkwell every turn, the game is not going to go the way you want it to. With that being said, if you're able to get 2 cards into your inkwell every turn, and then use a card like A Whole New World to refill your hand, you're going to be in an amazing position, and you're probably going to win the game. Well folks, I hope you're not surprised, but Ruby Amethyst Control is still #1. For a long time, Ruby Amethyst Control was really the only deck you would see in top 8 lists. Thankfully, in recent tournaments, we're seeing a much more diverse top 8, which is awesome. It's truly a testament to how well designed Disney Lorcana is. And in my opinion, I think we were seeing so much Ruby Amethyst because everybody knew, hey, this deck is probably the best deck. So there weren't a whole lot of people playing anything else. They wanted to win, and how do you win? You use Ruby Amethyst. So with that being said, this deck has undergone quite a lot of changes. The one we're looking at now just took first place in the most recent Pixelborn tournament. There are quite a lot of different versions of this deck, and honestly, they are all really, really good. The biggest difference I see in this deck versus the deck that won the last Pixelborn tournament is that this one is not running a copy of Sorcerer's Spellbook, which is really useful in mirror matches. However, this person specifically thought because of the recent increase in Sapphire Steel decks, it would be better to not include that spellbook because Sapphire Steel decks are running Benja. And Benja is a character that when he comes into play, you can banish an item card. So this person clearly is very intelligent, highly skilled player, and made the right choice because he did in fact face quite a lot of steel decks, and he came out on top. I like that this list is running 3 copies of Ursula. I think she's a really, really strong card. When she comes into play, your opponent loses a lore, and you get to draw a card for each lore lost in this way. So it's delaying your opponent's win condition while drawing you a card at the same time. That's a lot of value there. The other thing about this deck that I think is devastating, probably the most oppressive play that any deck could make in Lorcana, is playing Be Prepared, and then on the next turn, playing Lady Tremaine. I see this every single time I play against this deck, and unless you're able to play 2 characters following that Be Prepared, Lady Tremaine is just going to banish whatever character you put into play. Sounds pretty frustrating, right? I mean, holy moly cow. This deck just has all the control in the world, and quite frankly, it's pretty easy to see why this deck, Ruby Amethyst, is still the #1 best deck in Disney's Lorcana. Well, there you have it, folks. That is my list of the top 5 best decks in Disney's Lorcana right now. If you have a different opinion on what this list should look like, feel free to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. And if you enjoy getting consistent injections of all things Lorcana right onto your YouTube feed, please be sure to subscribe to my channel. As always, be kind and have a great day.